If I was starting from scratch today as a senior tech professional with years of experience but no direct clients, no consulting offer, no pipeline, and no idea how to move beyond recruiters, this is exactly what I would build. Not a personal brand first, not a website, not a logo, not a complicated business plan. I would build a consulting practice because that's the difference most people miss. A contractor gets placed, a consultant gets chosen. A contractor sells availability, a consultant sells a specific outcome. And a real consulting practice is not built on hope or referrals that arrive randomly or a recruiter making the next phone call. It is built on structure. I'm Javid Khan, founder of InovaOS, and I've spent over 25 years in enterprise technology, seeing this transition from almost every angle. I've been the engineer delivering the technical work. I've been the contractor selling my time. I've been the Big Four director seeing how consulting businesses package expertise at scale. I've been the founder building services companies from zero. And I've been the acquirer looking at what makes a business valuable beyond the person doing the work. I built and exited a cloud service business to a private equity-backed group at an 8-figure valuation. I helped build a 9-figure AWS business for a global enterprise inside 18 months, partly through acquiring 2 consultancies on the buy side. And today, I'm co-founder and CTO of CloudGuard AI, a venture-backed cybersecurity company on track for a 9-figure exit. And I was named one of the Times top 50 most ambitious business leaders in 2025. So when I talk about building an independent consulting practice, I'm not talking about theory. I'm talking about the architecture that takes someone from being highly skilled but commercially dependent to owning their positioning, their pipeline, their pricing, and their client relationships. Over the last 7 years, I've worked with hundreds of technology professionals making this exact transition. Contractors stuck in the agency cycle, corporate engineers sitting on the 6-figure salaries, wondering if there's a different path. And the thing that always surprises me is how consistent the pattern is. The sequence that gets someone from billing through a recruiter to generating 20K per month in independent consulting revenue, it's the same sequence almost every time. So I'm going to lay it out, all of it. If I was starting from scratch today with a decade plus of technical experience and nothing else, this is the exact playbook I'd follow. There are 5 phases, and I call it the practice stack. And the order is everything, because every phase builds on the one before it. You skip one or you do them out of sequence, the whole thing stalls. Phase 1, the positioning decision. So the very first thing I do before I build anything, before I update my LinkedIn, before I have a single conversation with a potential client, is make one decision. I'd pick a lane. And I mean a genuinely specific lane. Not I do cloud consulting, not I'm a security expert, not I help companies with their technology strategy. Those aren't positions. Those are category labels. And there's a fundamental difference between a category label and a market position. Think of it like this. If you're running a search query against a database, cloud consulting returns 10,000 results, right? That's not a position. That's a keyword. A position is the equivalent of a query so specific it returns 3 results, maybe 5. And the more specific the query, the fewer results it returns, and the more valuable each one becomes. So your job in phase 1 is to narrow that query until you're one of 3 people, not 1 of 3,000. So what would I actually do? I'd answer 3 questions. First, what type of company do I serve? Not everyone, not any company that needs help. A specific type. Mid-market financial services firms going through regulatory change, Series B SaaS companies hitting infrastructure scaling problems, healthcare organizations struggling with data compliance. One type of company with one set of characteristics. Second, what specific problem do I solve for them? And I mean specific, not I make their technology better. That's meaningless. Something like I help mid-market financial services firms pass their SOC 2 audits without hiring a full-time compliance team. You feel the difference? One is a category. The other is a solution to a problem that keeps a specific CTO awake at 2 in the morning. Third, why me? Why am I the obvious person to solve this? And this is where your technical depth becomes an asset instead of a commodity. Your 12 years in security architecture isn't a selling point on its own. Thousands of people have that. But 12 years in security architecture with 6 of those spent specifically inside regulated financial services, now you're not a generalist. You're the person who's already been inside the exact problem they're trying to solve. Does that make sense? 3 questions: who specifically, what problem specifically, why me specifically? And here's what I would not do. I would not try to keep my options open. That instinct, the one that whispers, but what if I miss opportunities by narrowing down? That instinct is the single biggest reason technically brilliant people stay stuck billing $750, $850 a day through agencies for decades. In other words, the goal isn't to be available for everything. The goal is to be the only viable option for one specific thing. And those are completely different strategies. One makes you interchangeable, the other makes you essential. So I'm on a call about 2 years ago. A cloud architect, roughly 13 years of experience across probably 4 or 5 industries, had been contracting through agencies for about 7 of those years. Tuesday afternoon, I think, and I asked him, when a client brings you in, what do you actually do? And he paused. It was a long pause. And then he said, honestly, whatever they need, cloud stuff. And I said, right, and how's that working for you? Another pause. I mean, I'm billing £800 a day, so it's fine. But when we dug in, his rates hadn't moved in 3 years. His pipeline was entirely controlled by 2 recruiters, and every engagement was a different problem in a different industry. He was doing cloud stuff, but nobody was calling him specifically because he was a person who solved a particular problem. They were calling him because he was available. So we spent about 4 weeks narrowing his position down to a cloud cost optimization for mid-market SaaS companies. Same technical skills, completely different frame. Within roughly 6 months, he had 3 direct client relationships and was billing the equivalent of about £2,200 a day. Not because he got better at cloud, because he got specific about the problem he solves. You see the shift? Same person, same skills, different positioning. Completely different outcome. So that's phase 1. Make the positioning decision. It's uncomfortable. It feels like you're shrinking the market, but what you're actually doing is making yourself findable and relevant to the exact people who will pay a premium. Not because the cliche sounds good, but because the economics are structurally different when you're specific. So if positioning is the foundation, the next question is, what do you actually sell? Because here's where most technical people make their second critical mistake. Phase 2, the offer architecture. So phase 2, and this is where it starts to feel genuinely different from contracting. If I were building this from scratch, I would not sell my time. I would not have a day rate. I would not bill by the hour. And I know this feels counterintuitive because it's what every contractor does. It's the model you're used to. It's the model recruiters have taught you. But selling time is the structural reason most contractors hit a revenue ceiling and never get past it. Here's why. Selling time is like running a monolithic application on a single server with fixed resources, right? You've got a finite amount of compute. Once you've allocated all the CPU cycles, you're maxed out. Doesn't matter how much demand there is, doesn't matter how good the application is, your throughput is capped by the hardware. So your revenue is capped by the number of hours you can physically deliver. That's not a business model. That's a resource utilization problem. So what I do instead is I'll build what I call an offer architecture, and it has 3 layers. Layer 1, a diagnostics offer, something that costs between £3,000 and £5,000 and takes roughly between 5 to 10 days of your time. This is a scoped assessment, a security posture review, a cloud readiness audit, an infrastructure health check, whatever maps your positioning from phase 1. The crucial thing about this offer is that it's not about delivering all the work. It's about diagnosing the problem, quantifying the cost, and presenting a roadmap. You follow? And that roadmap naturally leads to Layer 2, an implementation engagement. This is the core of your revenue. £10,000 to £20,000 per engagement depending on scope. 3 to 6 months. This is where you actually solve the problem you diagnosed. You're working closely with the client, but you're not billing hours. You're billing against deliverables and milestones. The contract says deliver X by Y date, not work 40 hours a week until further notice. See the difference? One model captures income at hours multiplied by rate. The other prices against the value of the outcome. Those are architecturally different. Layer 3, a retained advisory arrangement. Something like £2,000 to £4,000 per month. Ongoing, after the implementation is done, you stay connected as a strategic advisor. Maybe 1 call a week, maybe a monthly review session with their leadership team, maybe on-call availability for critical decisions. The point is that it creates recurring revenue. It compounds. You stack these. 3 advisory retainers at £3,000 a month is £9,000 in predictable recurring revenue before you can even think about new engagements. That's your baseline. That's your floor. So in other words, instead of 1 product, which is your time sold by the hour, you've got 3 products that feed into each other. The diagnostic leads to the implementation leads to the retainer. Each client potentially moves through all 3 layers, and the maths get very interesting very quickly. Let me put actual numbers on this. So 1 new diagnostic per month at £4,000, 1 active implementation at £15,000, spread across 3 months, so roughly £5,000 per month in revenue. And let's say over the first 6 months, you've built up 3 retained advisory clients at £3,000 each. That's £4,000 plus £5,000 plus £9,000, £18,000 a month from a handful of clients. And notice, None of that required you to sell 160 billable hours. You see the model? Think of it like moving from a single tenant architecture to a multi-tenanted one. Same core service, but the economics change completely when you structure it differently. The value of each client relationship multiplies because you're not just doing one thing for them and leaving, you're layered in. And here's what I would not do at this stage. I would not build a website. I would not design a logo. I would not spend 3 months crafting a 40-page proposal template with custom graphics. That's perfectionism disguised as preparation. It's the equivalent of over-engineering a prototype that nobody has asked for yet. All I need at this point is a clear description of each offer, the problem it solves, the outcome it delivers, and the price. 1 page. Honestly, I can explain it in a 5-minute conversation, which is all I need for phase 3. So that's the offer piece. 3 layers. You know what you sell and roughly what it costs. Now the question is, who do you sell it to? And how do you actually reach them without recruiters sitting between you and the client? The phase 3 is the one that makes most technical people genuinely nervous. Pipeline. Client acquisition without an agency doing it for you. And I get it. If you've been contracting through recruiters for years, the idea of generating your own client conversations feels like learning to fly a plane when you've only ever been a passenger. But here's the thing, it's simpler than you think. And the reason it's simpler than you think is because you already have more pipeline sitting dormant than you realize. You just haven't activated yet. Think of your professional network like an unmonitored server. The system is running, the data is there, the connections exist, but nobody's checking the dashboards. Nobody's running queries against it. No alerts configured. You've got 500, maybe 1,500 LinkedIn connections. People you've delivered projects alongside, clients whose problems you've solved, former colleagues who've moved to new companies and now have buying authority. That's not just a contact list. That's an unactivated pipeline sitting there waiting for a ping. So here's what I would do. I'd start with what I'd call direct reactivation. Step 1, go through your LinkedIn connections and identify every person who works at a company matching your positioning from phase 1. If I'm targeting mid-market financial services firms, I'd look for CTOs, heads of engineering, CISOs, VP of infrastructure at those firms. Make a list. Usually you can find between 30 to 50 relevant people from your existing network alone, sometimes more. Step 2, reach out. And this is important, not with a pitch, not with a sales message, not with a PDF attachment, with a wall of text about your services, with genuine curiosity. Something like, hey, I've recently moved into independent consulting focused specifically on the problem from phase 1. I'm curious, is this something your team is dealing with right now? That's it. Short. Human, a question, not a presentation. You follow? The goal of the first message is not to sell. The goal is to start a conversation. That's the only objective. Step 3, for the people who respond with interest, offer the diagnostics from phase 2 as the entry point. Not the big 15K implementation, the diagnostic. Low commitment for them, low risk. It lets you demonstrate your expertise inside their actual environment before anyone has to make a bigger decision. And once you've delivered that diagnostic and they've seen the quality of your thinking, the implementation conversation happens naturally. It flows from evidence, not from persuasion. Put another way, you're not cold calling strangers and asking for 20K. You're reconnecting with people who already know your name and offering them a focused, affordable next step. That's a fundamentally different kind of conversation. It's like the difference between knocking on someone's door uninvited and being invited back by someone who already let you in once. Now, the second pipeline channel, and this one compounds over time, content. The thing that struck me about this particular infrastructure consultant was how quickly it worked for her. She started posting on LinkedIn twice a week, very specific content, not generic thought leadership, not 5 tips for a better cloud architecture, actual detailed insights about Kubernetes migration challenges in healthcare environments. The kind of content where her ideal client reads it and thinks, this person understands my exact problem. Within about 10 weeks, a CTO at a health tech company reached out directly, said he'd been following her post for about a month. That became a £22,000 implementation engagement. No agency involved, no intermediary, no 15% commission lost. She told me it was the easiest client she'd ever won. And the reason is straightforward. By the time that CTO reached out, he already trusted her thinking. The content did the selling before the conversation even started. See the model? Direct reactivation gives you immediate pipeline from your existing network. Content builds compounding pipeline over time. You don't need both fully operational on day 1, but by month 3, You want both channels running. Does that make sense? And here's what I would not do. I would not spend money on paid ads, not at this stage. I would not invest in a fancy website with custom photography and animated case studies. I would not join networking groups where everybody is selling and nobody is buying. So the pipeline at this stage is relationship driven and content driven, nothing else. Keep it lean. The complexity can come later. Right now, you need conversations, not infrastructure. Now, those 3 phases were about building a structure, positioning, packaging, pipeline. This next phase is about something that feels completely different, but is actually the single biggest lever determining whether you reach 20K per month or stay stuck at 8K wondering what went wrong. So phase 4, pricing. And this is where I'd be most disciplined, because pricing is where technical people consistently leave the most money on the table. Most people price based on what they used to earn, right? So if you were billing £800 a day as a contractor, you take that number, multiply it by the days in the engagement, and that becomes your fee. And I really understand why. It feels safe, it feels logical, it's the calculation you already know how to do. It's like a reference point that you carry from your old model into your new one. Here's the problem with that. The calculation has absolutely nothing to do with the value of the outcome. It's like pricing a house based on the cost of the bricks. The bricks matter, obviously, they're necessary, but the price of the house is determined by the location, the market conditions, the demand, the problem it solves for the buyer, not the cost of the raw materials. Your time is the raw material. The outcome you deliver is the house. So what I do instead is price based on 3 factors: the cost of the problem, the value of the solution, and the risk reduction. Let me make this more tangible. Say your diagnostic reveals that a mid-market firm is spending £400,000 a year more than they need to on a cloud infrastructure because of architectural inefficiency. And your implementation engagement will fix that problem. So the cost of the problem is actually £400,000 per year, compounding. If your engagement fee is £20,000, that's a 20x return for them in the first year alone. At that ratio, £20,000 isn't expensive. It's a rounding error relative to the value. It's one of the best investments they'll make all year. You get the maths? When you anchor to the cost of the problem, your fee feels small. When you anchor to your old day rate, your fee looks big. Same number, different frame, completely different psychology for the buyer, which basically means your entire pricing conversation changes. You stop saying, I charge X pounds per day. You start saying, this problem is costing you £400,000 a year. I can fix it for 20K over 12 weeks. Want me to walk you through the approach? One conversation is about your cost. The other is about their gain. And those are fundamentally different negotiations with fundamentally different outcomes. £4,500. That's what one security consultant I worked with was charging for a compliance readiness assessment. Took her roughly 3 days of actual work. The client was a fintech startup. They needed SOC 2 certification to close an enterprise deal worth about £2 million in annual revenue. So her £4,500 fee wasn't a cost. It was a rounding error compared to the deal it enabled. She told me the client didn't even negotiate. Within about 4 months, she raised that diagnostics fee to £8,000. Not a single client pushback, because the frame was never about her time. It was about their outcome. She was pricing the bridge, not the bricks. And look, I want to be straight about something. If you spent years in this day rate world, this shift feels deeply uncomfortable. It feels like you're overcharging, like there's something dishonest about asking for that much. You're not overcharging. You're being accurate for the first time. The day rate model was the thing that was inaccurate. It systematically underpriced your impact by tying your fee to your time instead of your outcome. That's not modesty. That's a structural miscalculation you've been making for years. So price the outcome, not the input. Anchor every conversation to the cost of the problem, not the cost of your hours. That's phase 4. And because now you're pricing against value instead of time, something interesting starts to happen. You need fewer clients to hit your revenue target, so the constraint shifts. Delivery becomes a bottleneck, not demand, and that's exactly what phase 5 addresses. Phase 5, the delivery system. So phase 5, this is the phase that turns a consulting or service practice into something that actually compounds and eventually scales beyond you. If I was building this, here's what I'd be thinking about from the very first engagement, not just how do I deliver great work. That's the default. Of course you're going to deliver great work. You're technically excellent. That's why you're in this position in the first place. The real question is, how do I deliver great work in a way that's repeatable, documented, and eventually doesn't require me to do 100% of it myself? Think of it like the difference between building the infrastructure as code versus manually configuring servers. Both get you a working environment, but one is version controlled, one is replicable, one can scale horizontally, the other requires you to SSH in and do it by hand every single time. Your consulting delivery needs to be infrastructure as code, not manual configuration. So tactically, 3 things. First, templatize every engagement type. The diagnostic, standardized assessment framework. Same scaffolding every time, adapted to the client specific context, but the underlying structure is consistent. Same sections, same deliverable format, same process flow. The implementation? Documented phases with clear milestones and defined handoff points. You're not reinventing the wheel with every client, and this matters because it directly impacts your economics. If your diagnostic used to take 2 weeks because you were designing the approach from scratch each time, a templatized version takes 5 to 7 days. Same quality, same depth, half the time, which means your effective hourly rate just doubled even though you didn't change the price, right? Same revenue, less input time. That's leverage you get for free just by being systematic. Second, build a knowledge base from day one. Every insight from every engagement, every recurring problem pattern, every solution that worked, every question a client asked that you did not expect, documented. Not for a blog, not for marketing, for you. So that by engagement number 5, you're not relying on memory or starting from a blank page. You're building on accumulated intelligence. This is how real consultancies scale. Not by hiring faster, by systemizing what they know so every new engagement starts from a high baseline. In other words, every client engagement makes the next one better and faster. That's a compounding advantage. And it's the exact opposite of contracting, where every new contract starts from zero context, zero leverage, and zero accumulated knowledge. Third, and this is the one that gets you past 20K per month and eventually towards 30 to 40K and beyond, I'd start planning for leverage. Leverage means creating revenue that doesn't require your direct hands-on delivery for every single hour. That might mean bringing a junior consultant to handle implementation work while you operate at the strategic and diagnostic level. It might mean running group advisory sessions where instead of one-to-one retained advisory, you can facilitate a small group of 3 or 4 non-competing clients through a shared monthly session. Same value to each client, quarter of the time commitment from you. It's the difference between a single-threaded application and a multi-threaded one. Same processor, same core capabilities, but now you're running multiple operations concurrently instead of sequentially. You're not working harder, you're architecturally sound, and that changes the entire economics of your practice. You see the progression? Templatize, systemize, leverage. Each step increases your capacity without increasing your hours. And here's what I would not do. I would not try to leverage or automate anything before I've done it manually at least 5 to 10 times. You need to understand the delivery deeply, intimately before you can compress it or hand parts of it off. Trying to scale something you haven't mastered yourself is like deploying to production without ever running it in staging. You're going to break things, so do it manually first. Document everything as you go, then optimize once you truly understand what matters and what doesn't. So let me pull all of this together. The practice stack, 5 phases, and the order genuinely matters. Phase 1, the positioning decision. Pick one specific problem for one specific type of buyer. Make the query narrow enough that it returns 3 results, not 10,000. Phase 2, the offer architecture. 3 layers that feed each other. Diagnostic leads to implementation. Implementation leads to retained advisory. Revenue stacks and compounds instead of resetting to 0 every month. Phase 3, the pipeline. Direct reactivation of your existing network for immediate conversations, plus consistent content for compounding inbound. No agencies, no intermediaries, no percentage loss of someone who made a phone call. Phase 4, the pricing frame. Price the outcome, not the input. Anchor every conversation to the cost of the problem, not the cost of your time. Phase 5, the delivery system. Templatize, systemize, leverage. Make every engagement compound into the next one so the practice gets better and better and more efficient with every client you serve. And honestly, the thing that surprises most people when they see this laid out isn't how complicated it is. It's how achievable it is. Because none of these phases require some extraordinary talent you don't already have. They require decisions. Positioning is a decision. Pricing is a decision. Reaching out to your network is a decision. The technical ability, the domain expertise, the professional credibility, you already have those. What's missing is the architecture. And that's what the practice stack gives you. Said differently, the gap between £750 a day through an agency and £20,000 a month in independent consulting is not a skills gap. It's a structural gap. Same person, same brain, same expertise, completely different architecture around it. Now, I'm not going to pretend this happens overnight. Realistically, if you execute this well, you're looking at roughly 6 to 12 months to reach a consistent 20K a month run rate. So the first 3 months are about positioning, building your offer layers, and reactivating your pipeline. Months 4 through to 6, you're landing your first direct clients and refining your delivery. Months 7 through to 12, the retainers, the services start stacking, the content starts compounding, and the flywheel kicks in. That's the honest timeline. Does that make sense? It's not a get rich quick thing. It's an architecture play, but it works. I've seen it work over and over again. And here's the thing I want to leave you with. If you're sitting there right now billing through an agency or sitting in a corporate role earning six figures and wondering whether there's a different model, the question you should be asking yourself isn't whether you're good enough to do this. You are. The question is whether you're going to build the architecture or keep renting someone else's. So if this resonated, or if you're a senior technology professional thinking seriously about making this transition, I've put together a more detailed breakdown of the practice stack that you can download. The link is in the description below. And if you want to go further than that, if you want structured guidance implementing this with accountability and a community of people making this exact same transition, that's exactly what Launch Program is designed for. Details in that are in the description as well. See you in the next one.